I've been working on a few videos recently, but because of the third lockdown in England, what we're going through at the moment, I haven't been able to complete them. But one video I did start last year was one about where the Beatles lived as children. Earlier in the year, I'd done a video about Woolton and Woolton Village, and as John Lennon and George Harrison lived in Woolton, well, George Harrison almost by a few feet, I thought I would start with those two. So this video will be part of a larger project, but for now this is the houses that John Lennon and George Harrison were born into. This is Church Road in Wavertree, Liverpool, and I'm heading towards Penny Lane. If you come from Liverpool, you'll regard all this area as being Penny Lane. Many of the businesses which are mentioned in the Beatles song, the barbershop for instance, are actually in Church Road. All the Beatles would have known Penny Lane. John Lennon, as we will see soon, lived off Church Road. George Harrison basically lived at the top of Church Road, and Ringo Starr didn't live too far away in Toxteth. Paul McCartney was in the choir at St Barnabas Church, which is the church you can see in front of us, which we've been walking towards, and that's actually on the corner of Penny Lane where we're headed now. The junction we're about to cross is Smithdown Road. If we were to turn left here, we would come to a roundabout, and one of the exits off the roundabout is Menlove Avenue, which is where John Lennon's Aunt Mimi's house is, which is the National Trust property which is on the Beatles tour. Another exit off the roundabout would take us to Allerton, which is where Paul McCartney's house was. So, Penny Lane, made famous by the Beatles in their 1967 song, isn't without its controversy, because a local historian told everybody that Penny Lane was named after a slave trader called James Penny. But a little bit of research, and that's not true at all. It's not named after James Penny, and it's not named after any slave traders. We're now outside St Barnabas's Church, and just around the corner is Penny Lane. In fact, it's right in front of us now, so I'm going to cross the road and take a short walk down Penny Lane itself. I'll show you a little bit more of Penny Lane. We'll have a walk a little bit further. As you can see, it's pretty much a residential lane with one or two shops. It's not changed over the years. It would have been the same in the 1960s pretty much. Maybe some names have changed over the shops, but it's pretty much as was. Okay, going to cross the road here and retrace our steps back to Smithdown Road. We'll head towards John Lennon's mother's house, which is just off Church Road where we've come from. The Liverpool that the Beatles were born into would have been a very different place than the Liverpool we know today. John Lennon was born in 1940 on the 9th of October. We were in the Second World War then, and a month after he was born, the 28th of November 1940, was the first blitz on Liverpool, and Liverpool was very heavily bombed during the war. It was the main seaport for goods being transported by ship from the United States, and it would have been a very, very dark time. We're now back at St Barnabas's Church. The white building which you can see in front of us is the bus shelter in the middle of the roundabout, which was a lyric from the Beatles song. In the 60s this would have been a bus shelter and toilets. It was a terminus for many buses, and prior to that it was a shelter for the inspectors who worked on the trams. It was bought in 1989, I think, for use as a bistro, and the top floor, the glass dome type top floor, was built, but it closed in 2003 and hasn't been used since. So as I said earlier, John Lennon was the eldest of the four famous Beatles, born on the 9th of October 1940. He was born in Liverpool Maternity Hospital, which was up until the mid-90s located on Scotland Road, or if you come from Liverpool, Scotty Road. Scotland Road is also where Cilla Black lived, so there's a little bit of a connection there to them prior to being friends at the Cavern Club. So we're headed towards John Lennon's mother's house. His mother's name was Julia, and this is the house where she lived, and this is the house where he would have been brought up in his early years. He later went to Julia's sister's house with her husband on Menlove Avenue, which is probably the more famous of the two, because, as I said earlier, it's the National Trust property which you can go and visit and have a look round, and it's still kept in its 1950s, 1960s furniture and styling. So we're roughly at the point where this video began, and we've been retracing our steps up Church Road. On the left hand side you probably noticed a row of shops which are usually very, very busy. One of them being the barber shop, which is mentioned in the Beatles song as well. I think it's now called Tony Slavin's. As I said earlier, Liverpool was very heavily bombed during the Second World War. As I said, the first blitz was on the 28th of November 1940. There was one slightly later which was 23rd of December, and then the very famous May Blitz of 1941, which lasted for around about 7-8 nights, May the 1st to May the 8th, and I would imagine being caught up in all that, it would have been pretty frightening. Liverpool was the largest, or took the most amount of bombs outside of London, because it was the main trade route for food and supplies coming in from America, and the Germans wanted to basically wipe the port out. So they dropped bombs, and they dropped mines on parachutes which ended up in people's back gardens. This area is roughly 4 miles from Liverpool city centre. the Albert Dock area, which is now the highlight of visitors' activity. It's the place to go, Albert Dock, but that was absolutely bombed to pieces during the war, as was most of the surrounding area. So living here 4 miles away, you would have known about the bombings. So this is Newcastle Road. We've just gone past John Lennons' house, gone to the end of the road and turned round and headed back. And the house is on the right hand side behind the large white van. So quite a nice road of terraced houses, probably bigger than you'd expect once you're inside, but from the Rockstar point of view, quite a humble beginning. We're now headed on Church Road once again, and we're heading up towards what's known as Picton Clock and the former Abbey Cinema. Church Road is quite a busy road really. It's residential, and as you can see there's a mix of some very nice large houses alongside some smaller terraces, but it's a thoroughfare from Smithdown Road to Picton, Wavertree Road, and also it's a way out of Liverpool to head towards the M62 motorway. But it also houses one of Liverpool's poshest schools, one of the bastions of teaching in Liverpool, the Blue Coat School, which you have to pass an exam to get into as a young 11-year-old. The Blue Coat School is on the left hand side, the opposite side of the road to us. I'll show you some of it, although I'm not too keen on filming schools. We're on our way up to what was the Abbey Cinema, and it was a place where I used to spend quite a great deal of time when I was a kid in the 60s and 70s. My family used to come here and we'd watch the latest release. I know George Harrison and John Lennon did too, and John Lennon mentioned it in a song, Places I Remember All My Life, with the line, "In the circle of the Abbey, I have seen some happy hours." It closed in 1979, ceased being a cinema, and for some time it was a snooker club. It was later turned into a co-op, and very recently the co-op moved out and Lidl have bought the site. So there's great worry that Lidl might pull it down and turn it into a shop shaped like the rest of their stores, and it would be a huge tragedy because the Abbey is a very beautiful Art Deco building. I hope you got a quick view there of the very lovely Blue Coat School as we passed it. Along with the Abbey at the top of this road, the former Abbey Cinema, there's also the Picton Clock, which is a landmark which everybody around here will know, and then we're going on to George Harrison's original dwelling as a young child. There is actually another place of interest as we get to Picton Clock and turn left onto High Street. There's a pub called the Cock and Bottle, and it has what was the smallest house in England. It was the smallest house. It isn't anymore because it's been incorporated into the pub. But on the way back we'll have a quick glance at it and I'll give you a little bit of history. There are quite a few interesting and important buildings in this area, and one day in the future when I'm not documenting things about the Beatles or locked down and can't go out, I'll come back and do a photo trip of what I would consider some very important Liverpool buildings. One I did do recently was the Lock-Up, which is opposite the Abbey Cinema, and it's a very small building, and if you were drunk and disorderly, you would be put in this building to sober up. I believe the next morning they served you breakfast as well before they let you out on your way. So that forms part of the history of this area of Liverpool, and it's quite fascinating. So I think I will come back and do some work on it. Liverpool really does seem to have lost a lot of old and possibly very important buildings over the years. Even in my lifetime I've seen some very grand architecture pulled down and removed and replaced with either nothing or something which is of less value, at least to the eye. I don't know. Perhaps all cities and towns have lost grand architecture over the years, but Liverpool seems to have lost more than most somehow, and not just in the suburbs but in the city centre as well. It's just amazing what people are willing to throw away in the name of modernism, if that's the right word. It's just such a loss. The large building which you can see looming up in front of us is the former Abbey Cinema, and as I said earlier, its site has been bought by German supermarket company Lidl, but I'm not going to really include it in this video. I think I will come back, as I said, and document the whole area and its important buildings. We're walking towards this bus which is parked up at the pavement, and I'd just like to let you know that the signage at the front of the bus wasn't really flashing. It was quite solid. It's just the frame rate of my video camera makes it look like it's going on and off. But as kids we would get the bus into town from Woolton, where I lived, and our first choice would have been the number 5, which was pretty direct and pretty fast in its route. But one of the buses, I think it was the 73, used to come in this direction. My mum used to say, "Oh, don't get the 73, it goes all round the world," which was a little bit of an exaggeration, but it did used to come up, I think, towards the Abbey. The Coffee House pub is a really nice building as well, and it's also a very nice pub if you wanted to visit it, if we ever get the chance to enjoy pubs ever again. So we're walking towards Picton Clock. Picton Clock Tower is a Grade 2 listed clock tower, and it was built in 1884 by a guy called Sir James Picton, and it was a memorial to his wife Sarah Pooley. Sir James Picton was an architect in Liverpool. Only Liverpool though could build toilets underneath such a beautiful clock tower, and then even worse, let the toilets become abandoned and derelict. Brilliant. What planners we have. We're now on High Street in Wavertree, and we're heading towards the pub that I mentioned earlier, the Cock and Bottle, which has the former smallest house in England attached to it. We'll have a look at that on the way back. Years ago, when I was a kid, we used to come down here on the bus and go to Picton Baths, which is further down this road on the left hand side. It was the first place I went to and spent new money, the new decimalised money that everybody's had since. Up until then we were on pounds, shillings and pence, so the first place I spent the new money was at Picton Baths, or possibly on the bus on the way to Picton Baths. High Street, which we're on at the moment, if you carry on in the direction that we're walking, you'll end up at Edge Hill. If you've ever got a train to Liverpool, you'll know Edge Hill Station is the one before Lime Street, and High Street eventually joins Edge Lane just before the junction with the new Liverpool University Hospital, which hasn't been quite completed yet. So we need to cross the road here because the property that we're going to see, number 12 Arnold Grove, is on the opposite side of the road, tucked away a little bit. There is actually a quicker way to it, but you have to walk down a passageway which is occupied by a garage, and they've got all their cars out and they're busy working on them, and if you walk past this, tend to give you a little bit of a funny look. I'm not sure if you're supposed to walk down there or not, but when I came scouting out the other day, that's the way I went in. Up until then, I'd never seen Arnold Grove. I didn't really know what to expect, although I've been up and down High Street many times, even, as I said, from being a kid going to the baths at Picton Baths. I've never been to George Harrison's first home before, so it was a learning curve for me as well. So this is it, this is Arnold Grove, and as you can see it's unadopted. Unadopted means, I don't know, you can't get out the other end because someone's built a great big brick wall. Number 12 is behind the Skoda, it's the white door behind the Skoda. I don't want to film it too much because it is someone's house, but that's where George Harrison lived as a very young child. So the smallest house in England, or the previously smallest house in England, was built in the late 19th century. It's been home to quite a few people. One family had 8 children apparently. It's 6 foot wide, it's 14 foot from front to back, and it was absorbed into the pub in 1952, so it's no longer the smallest house because it's part of the Cock and Bottle. The last occupants who lived there moved out in 1925. The smallest house in the UK, if you've ever seen it, is near Conwy Castle in Wales, and that's 6 foot wide and 10 foot from front to back, and that one does look tiny. But you can still see this one next door to the Cock and Bottle, or within the Cock and Bottle between the pub and the bookies next door. There is one more building which I forgot to mention, even though we've walked past it once. You can see it in the distance coming up. Its steps come out onto the pavement. It's number 102 High Street, Wavertree, and it's the only Judge and Bow-fronted shop left in Liverpool, and it's still used today. I've left this film pretty much unedited because people who watched my Woolton Village video, especially people who had lived in the area and moved away, said they enjoyed it because it was something that they could look back on, and it reminded them of a place which they once knew. So I thought I'd do the same thing with this. So I've just left it as a 25-minute stroll from Penny Lane up Church Road and onto Wavertree High Street. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch up soon.